Good evening, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the resumption of an adjourned special council meeting from the 19th of May 2020. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on and share the message from the elders. Kaya kaya broodias, marmon and yoks. Nina de mort, nichakulan nalamaya Kalamunda budja, ye. Nandurapan, wadulas kulan, jina. Nunadanicha, nunga budja, nunga burdias kura, ye. Burda, kedalak, burda, kaya, yunga. Hello, welcome to our leaders, men and women who have come to our place today, this evening, and I'm happy to see you all standing on Noongar land of their elders past, present and future. Thank you. The legislative framework, including standing orders, requires that the meeting recommence at the point it finished on the adjournment, which was after public question time and after deputations. Clause 6.95 of the standing orders provides a maximum of 4 deputations. As presiding member, I am able to approve a departure from the standing orders, and although I made it clear at the adjournment that further deputations would not be heard unless new information of importance was to be considered, I have ruled that a number of further new deputations of 5 minutes can be heard, so I urge you to make points only and be brief. Please be advised that if you have already given a deputation, you will not be able to make a further one. CEO, please advise of attendance, apologies, leave of absence.
Through the chair, Councillor Billich has advised that she will be late. So for now, we'll note her as late. We'll see if she becomes an apology for later.
Thank you. We'll move on to those new deputations. The first one is Mr. George Watts. Mr. Watts, would you please come to the microphone, state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is George Watts. I've been asked to present the findings of a review I undertook for the PC Reservation Group on their behalf of the noise management plan that has been previously submitted and I believe tabled. That report that I prepared, I believe, has been provided to the council. In terms of the conclusions of that review, essentially the report is deficient in terms of assessing the noise impact of the proposed development. Basically, the summary of the deficiencies are there's no calculation of noise levels associated with the proposed venue. There's reference to isolated variances to the proposed operating hours and conditions with no indication how this additional noise impact will be managed, and it's particularly pertinent given that only 4 special events a year can be catered for under the Regulation 18 exemption process. No determination of noise levels at the nearest premises to the proposed venue. No consideration of presence of annoying characteristics that may be present in the noise emissions associated with the venue. No justification of the proposed noise control measures, i.e. engineering noise barriers, but no indication of how they are actually going to work. Erroneous consideration of vegetation as being able to act as a physical barrier to noise. No consideration of ambient noise levels in the area for all time periods of operation, albeit the consideration of ambient noise levels is considered a moot point. And finally, no comparison of noise impact against Environmental Protection Noise Regulations 1997 at neighbouring premises. I have been provided a copy of the council memorandum that I believe has been provided since the meeting adjournment, and do note that a proposed condition of a noise impact assessment be prepared prior to occupation of the restaurant to the satisfaction of the council would be undertaken, which seems like a reasonable approach to the issue at hand, with one deficiency, I suppose, in that process being With patron noise and music, in particular for venues such as this, the ability for a development to control that noise may require further built form that may not be part of this development application, i.e. physical barriers and the like. So the problem with providing a condition like this may present an issue down the track in terms of the venue cannot possibly comply with the regs without another development application for changing built form. Other than that, a very good start. It's just that probably for at least the patron noise and music be front-loaded in terms of being provided with a development application. I hope that was under 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. So, councillors, do you have any questions of Mr. Watts? Councillor Sewell.
Just in terms of the sound barriers chairs that have been provided to address the noise, there have been some rumours about whether they are up to standard. Was that part of the noise assessment, or is that something that the city undertook to inspect?
Mr. Watts.
In terms of the barriers referred to in the report, to be honest, I have no idea what they are, other than they can be lowered and raised at will. The red flag with such an approach suggests that they're probably too lightweight to act as an effective noise barrier. However, I can't confirm that that is the case, but based on my experience, highly unlikely, but could be wrong. But there are.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you for coming to speak to us and also for providing your report to all of us.
Not a
Thank
problem.
you.
My pleasure.
I would like to ask Mr. Phil Stewart to come to the microphone. Again, please state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Phil Stewart and I reside at 79 Hillside Road in Piercybrook, and I am the closest resident to the Chalet Rigi. I have a few concerns in putting a restaurant in its location. The location of the Chalet Rigi is placed in and amongst rural properties. I'm concerned you have not considered the unique risks that this presents. The first thing I would like to bring to your attention is the fact that in the development of the restaurant, there is no fencing to be put up to keep the patrons on the property. The risk of the patrons and the risk to the residents around the restaurant see the rural property, with a rural property presents their own risks. There are firearms and poisons are used on rural properties to control feral pests. There are steep cliffs, waterfalls and dams are not fenced on neighbouring properties to the restaurant. This poses a financial risk to the property owners, being that if a patron was to wander onto a rural property next door and injure themselves, the property owner would be liable, not the Chalet Rigi. Also, further risk to the patrons. This is heightened due to the fact that people are coming from a background of not knowing the risk of being on a rural property. There are risks of drowning, serious injury or death. If a fence was to be put in, this would greatly reduce the risks. The financial cost of the fence should be the responsibility of the Chalet Rigi, as if there was no development, there would be no need for a fence. Further to this, we have spoken to the neighbours of the Corsada house, and they have stressed to us to not let what has happened to their beautiful part of the world happen to us. We have spoken to the Deputations family, who when the Corsada house has a function on, they cannot sleep at night due to the excessive noise. To the exact safety concerns that I've brought to you, are a real problem at this location. They often have several people, including children, every weekend found wandering through their property or often lost after they go for a bushwalk. What if this was the neighbouring property to the Chalet Regi? The risk of falling off a waterfall or drowning in a dam. You only have to talk to the neighbours of the Score Cider House to see how much of a bad idea this is. The other point I would like to make and bring up is my concerns of being the closest resident to the Chalet Regi. A restaurant of this size would destroy what we have in the valley, a peaceful place away from the city, away from the nightlife of restaurants and pubs. Now this council is considering bringing the exact thing of what we try to escape in living in this valley. Piercybrook itself only has a population of 214 people. This restaurant is proposing in bringing in over double that population each day. That noise will be catastrophic to the environment. There won't be an afternoon where we can sit on our balconies and enjoy the birds in the trees or the sunset over the hill without the noise of the restaurant of over double the population all sitting in one spot. This is not what the residents of Piercybrook want, nor is it what Piercybrook needs. What I would like you to take from this, councillors, is if you were put in my shoes, living in a beautiful place, away from the noise of the city, how would you feel if a size of this development was put right next door? Would you be up in arms like the residents of Piercybrook are? After all, we live in the city of Kalamunda for the exact opposite reasons of what this development is proposing. Thank you.
Speak to us. I would now like to ask Linda Munro to come to the microphone. Again, please state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Linda Munro. I live at 75 Elson Road, Peacebrook. I overlook the Peacebrook Valley. I've lived there for 30 years, since 1989, and I've raised my 3 children there. My decision to purchase and continue to live here is based on the zoning that protects this area from development and use other than that of rural in the water catchment area. Peacebrook is special. The stillness here is rare. I embrace sharing the quiet environment of this rural landscape zone, but the use and the development of the tourism in this valley need to be sensitively planned. I often hear the muted voices of cyclists and walkers in conversation as they use the bush tracks hundreds of metres from my yard, and I'm pleased to see the bush is being enjoyed. The valley is to be valued and shared in keeping with the zoning and respect for tranquil and clean environment. What the council is asking us to consider is a large-scale commercial development in a rural setting against Water Authority advice. It's an assault to our home life. Why are we being asked as residents to even comment on this amendment of 18 July 2019 to increase numbers from 80 to 480 a day? When this first approval went in for 80 in 2006 and subsequently lapsed, as residents we took that application on good faith. On good faith it was going to be 80. And now we're faced with 480. In the meeting of 19th of May, the proponent, Mac, stated, and it's stuck with me for 2 weeks. I'm a businessman, he said, and he's made a major investment in the hills, and I'm looking to comply with the law. Well, I'm a landholder and a resident. I've made a major investment in the hills, and I'm looking to comply with the law. I'm one of 210 residents, and they've all made major contributions to the hills, our homes, our places of rest, sanctuary in a sensitive rural zone. As a group, our investment is larger than Mac's. That should count in the scheme of size. Our presence in the valley is larger than that of Mac. Our use of the amenity is larger. And yet our voice, our relevance, appears diminished when the businessman enters the profit. And complying with the law, well, we've got a legal clearing, we've got a legal filling, we've got a legal use, we've got development without approval, we believe. A history of intimidation and threatening people, even the council. Just send 2 of your employers out at a time to be safe.
Excuse me, Mrs. Munro, I think you're verging on the point of disrespect to Mr.
Okay.
McCormack, so please be careful.
Fine, thank you. If the pursuit of this development was right for this area, the approval process would flow and be embraced. The fact that this isn't happening is it shows it's fundamentally flawed. It doesn't fit the zoning of this area. I'd like to raise the issue of and the subject of a microbrewery. On the Facebook page of Chalet Regi, for all public to see, there is a notice that Chalet Regi is a microbrewery restaurant in the Bickley Valley. I have not heard any discussion thus far about scrutiny of a microbrewery being part of this development, and yet it's there for the public to see for months. And on this, it also notes that they'll be celebrating Oktoberfest every day. And I fail to see how celebrating Oktoberfest every day fits the family-friendly feeling restaurant represented in the meeting of 19th of May by Francesca of Evergreen Consultants and Mac.
Sorry, time's up.
Sorry, if you could just finish, thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for Ms. Munro? Thank you for coming to speak to us. And for our last deputation, I would like to call Mr. Nathaniel Altinier to the microphone. You also have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name's Nathaniel Altinier from 151 Alderside Road, PC Brook. My grandparents bought in PC Brook back in 1950, in which they worked the land, and I bought part of that land and continued the tradition. The Chalet Regi I also worked at, and knew the owner as well, and also my mum and sisters worked there. It was a great place back then, and it was a fraction of the size. It was tiny, and now it only consisted of one main room in which all the dining and weddings were held. That room was fully enclosed, brick and tile, surrounded by trees. I couldn't even see it from my house. Now it's a completely different building. All the trees around the building have been cleared, and there's a huge deck overlooking the valley. My concerns are that this deck area is going to be used for functions or events such as weddings. Now there was a wedding held at the Chalet Regi last year, I could hear every word that the MC said from inside my house, and I live just over under a kilometre away. Now, one off, no worries. We've all had weddings in the valley. Over the time, it's fine, but every weekend, it'd be a bit hard. And it's very well possible that it may be every weekend, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And if any councillors here don't think that's possible, then make it an amendment. Limit the amount of weddings this venue can have. Because if not, I can guarantee that weddings will be targeted, because that's where the money is. Now, I don't know if any of you councillors are aware that I own the blueberry farm in the Bickley Valley. The blueberry peak season runs from September to February, which coincides with the wedding season. And I hire up to about 40 staff, both locals and backpackers. I personally work 18 hours a day through that season, 7 days a week. It's a lot of time, and up before the sunrise, pick during the day, pack at night, farmers markets on weekends. So if I get kept up at night, I won't be happy. I need my sleep, and I think that we're all entitled to it. I think we deserve sleep. I would like to extend the farm, and if there's too much noise pollution, I may have no other choice but to move it elsewhere. Not that I want to, I love the place, and I think every resident loves it. So where do we go from here? I would like the councillors to consider a 10 o'clock curfew on any given night, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Daytime, there's usually background noises, trucks, cars, motorbikes, but it's night time that the silence is. And I would like all functions, including weddings and birthdays, to be held in the original function room after dark. That room has much better soundproofing. So I wish all councillors to think very carefully about this, and for reasons that have been brought up over the last couple of weeks, either adjourn it or reject this proposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. Do you have any questions? Mr Altinier, if you just come back, see if there's any questions from councillors. Councillor Sewell?
It's just a point of clarification. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday has been highlighted. I just wanted to ensure that Nathaniel was aware that it was a 7-day operation at this point in time that was being looked at, from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and up to 12 a.m. on Friday and Saturday.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Boyd?
I have a question for the Director of Development Services, if I can, just on something that Nathaniel said. Under the current application that Council's considering tonight, if it was approved, would the applicant be able to hold weddings at the venue without special applications?
Through the chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Boyd. Weddings or other similar events, 21st birthdays and the like, could be held at the venue should it be approved this evening, subject to the confines of the conditions that are proposed as part of the officer recommendation, that being patron numbers, hours of operation and the like.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you for coming to speak to us. There are no announcements by the member presiding without discussion, and there are no matters for which the meeting may be closed. And I would like to ask the CEO, are there any disclosure of interest?
Through the chair, no.
Thank you. So we're going on to reports to council. Council, as you have seen, we've got one amendment to the officer recommendation and one alternative motion. So I'll ask Councillor Ritchie to briefly outline her alternative motion, and then my plan is to go back to the officer recommendation. If we get a mover and a seconder, I will ask them if they will accept the amendment, and then we'll vote on that, and should that not pass, we will move to the alternative motion. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My concern has always been about the scale of the proposed operation. It seemed to me that simply because the sewage system allows for 480 people is not a good enough reason on its own to accept that's what the figure should be. While I understand that the DY report is an advisory one, nevertheless, that environmental potential contamination of that Helena Valley catchment is very real. And I have yet to see any complete mitigation of that risk. I also have ongoing concerns with the fire management and with the traffic. And I think it's very difficult also to ignore the 56 written applications and also the very heartfelt concerns that we've had from the residents. I haven't been a councillor very long, but I certainly have not heard any length of discussion and submissions that we've had over this particular submission. I also note that it was from the report itself that talks about the council to decide on the scale of the operation and how appropriate is the scale in a rural setting. And that's what it comes down to for me. Are we going to accept a scale of operation in the vicinity of 480 people from what effectively, although it has been an eatery for a long time, was never intended, I don't believe, to be at this scale. I note also, however, that we also, as a city, are trying to look for income, to look for local employment, and so it's a matter of trying to find a balance between looking after that rural environment, but at the same time trying to find some way forward. I am a volunteer at the visitor centre, and so many people say to me, where can I go for lunch on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday? And there's nothing open in the hills. So the notion that we're able to provide something...
Councillor Ritchie,
yes.
you are going into debate. I just really wanted you to outline.
Sure. So what I'm really looking to do is to try and find a balance between the needs of the community and the needs of the residents, and so my alternate motion is to limit the number of people that can be at the Chalet Regi over a day as 250, and at any point in time 150. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just outline the amendment that Councillor Margaret Thomas, myself, is making, and that is at any one time only 200 patrons. And that's self-explanatory. It just helps the traffic, the noise and the parking. So that if there are 480, it needs to be spread across the day, but only 200 at any one sitting. So that's the amendment. I now move to the report, the officer recommendation, and councillors, you are all aware of the changes of conditions. You've all had time to look at those, so we are looking at this report with those changed conditions. The officer recommendation is on page 31. Do I have a mover? Councillor Blair, seconder? Is there a seconder to the officer? Councillor Giardina. I'm now going to ask the mover and the seconder if you would add the amended point to this motion, and that is that only 200 patrons at any one sitting. Councillor Blair, are you happy to add that?
Yes, I'm happy to add that.
Councillor Giardina?
Certainly, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
It's been...
Thank you.
It's been hammered over and over again, and I'm happy to go along with that if we can restrict that.
Thank you. So I now go to the move.
Madam Chair, if I may, just to clarify, I think it was 250, Councillor Ritchie said, and you just said 200.
So Councillor Ritchie's alternative motion is 250 patrons.
Yes.
And only 150 at one time.
Yes.
My amendment is the officer recommendation of 480 patrons, but just to add only 200 in one sitting.
Okay.
Are you happy with that?
No,
Understand
what I'm
that?
saying is that Councillor Blair just moved, and so what are you saying that he just moved? The original?
The Councillor Blair moved the officer recommendation, but added another point to say only 200 at one sitting.
Okay. All
Are
right.
you happy with that? Understand that, Councillor
I
Billett?
understand it, not saying I'm happy.
Sure. We'll go to the mover. Councillor Blair.
Thank you. I just see this amendment, or minor amendment, as a balancing of numbers to allow all of the issues that we look at as concerning water, access, fire, parking, noise. I just find that the allowance of the 200 will help to balance those concerns. That's all.
We'll go to the seconder, Councillor Giardina. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Madam Chair, as I stated just a few minutes ago, that this application has been going backwards and forwards now for a duration of time, and there's four areas that I'm looking at to come across with a balanced outcome. One, of course, is what's come out from our community. We've also extended the time frame for them to make comment, and we've taken into account a lot of the comments that have come through, and even as far as this evening. What I'm fearful of, if in the event council doesn't come across with a recommendation which is workable, that this guy's a businessman. We know his track record. He's got a lot of other businesses around the traps, my understanding. So he's got a fair idea what he needs. And look, I don't know of his business plan, what it is, what it entails, what he needs to make it work. But as a business person myself, I'm happy that we've come to this arrangement that you've just, or Councillor Blair has moved, that 200 at any one time, which is probably, if he has, say, 200 in the morning, 200 at lunch, that'll leave him 80 for the evening, or vice versa, whichever way he needs to go. And if he needs other approvals, if he needs to have probably a wedding or what have you at one time, that'll be it. Whether it's a lunchtime or whatever, something he's got to work out. But I'm very conscious of what our community has said. The noise factor in particular, that does bother me a little bit. He has put some roller shutters in there, which he believes that will mitigate a lot of the noise. That's yet to be seen. We'll see. But I can assure Mr. McCormack that if this gets a Guernsey this evening, and he does not comply with what council has said, and it comes back to us, there'll be no mercy from us as councillors. That I can assure him. There's a lot of policemen around, and what I mean, a lot of residents that are going to be watching what he does. So, one thing that I mentioned to a resident yesterday, I think that what McCormack has done, he's actually come to this council and asked for approval. He didn't have to. He could have gone to JDAP, he could have gone to WAPC, but he chose to come to this council. He lives in the valley, he breathes the same air, lives in the same area as all the residents do. He's given them an opportunity to have a say. Right or wrong, he's done that. And to me, that goes for something. I haven't agreed with Mr. McCormack on many occasions, or even when I was the mayor. But I can't go into the personalities, and I don't. I'm making decisions on planning grounds, and I'm chairman of the tourism committee. I like to see tourism up in the hills. I fought for 2 years for that to happen, for that committee to be up and running. It's had only one meeting so far because of the COVID-19. We couldn't have any others. But I think we need tourism to survive in this city. Look at our city. Look at our Kalamunda town centre. We need people up here to survive, and we need people like McCormack, similar to him, that have got a business mind to bring businesses up the hills, not necessarily through the valleys and what have you, but that's where he lives, and that's where he's chosen the place to expand the small business that was there. I'm not saying I agree with the expansion in its entirety, and that's why I'm looking at very carefully the numbers that are going to be hopefully If he can attract that number, you know, maybe in the first 2 or 3 months, 4 months, he maybe will. But there's other restaurants in Kalamunda that have done that, and they've quietened down too after a certain period of time. So I think we've got to just wait and see what comes out. But because I'm saying yes this evening, it doesn't mean to say that I'll be saying yes again if he comes here and that he's done something wrong. And I just hope that he does recognise he's got community around him it could have an impact on them, and that he does the right thing by them. I don't want to receive phone calls that he's done something wrong. There's a couple other restaurants that from time to time we do get calls from the neighbours. I just hope that this one is not one of them. So I think this is probably, in the scale of things, it hasn't been that we haven't had a flood of these type of restaurants in these areas. So this one will be watched very, very carefully as we go. So if for future developments in rural areas. So, but look, I think that I've spoken enough. So, Madam Chair, please, I ask councillors to please support it. Let's give it a go with that amount of people at that given time.
Do we have a speaker against the motion? Councillor Boyd.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. I'm just going to briefly speak against it and just foreshadow that I would be in support of Councillor Ritchie's alternate should this motion be defeated, and based on the community concerns that have been raised and also the rationale provided by Councillor Ritchie, I think her alternate and the reduced numbers will assist in mitigating some of the concerns that have been raised, both by the community, by some of the traffic management issues, some of the fire risk and evacuation issues or potential, and I think 250 patrons per day plus staff provides an adequate opportunity for business in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to speak for the motion. And the first point I would like to make is this applicant didn't make an application for 250 persons. So if we change what his actual application was, he will not accept it and go somewhere else. I think we have really listened to the community. A lot of us had meetings with them. We came back to our offices and told them of the concerns of the community, and there were a lot of them. And I think our officers, I've never seen them work so hard on an application or make as many stringent conditions as they have for this application to address the concerns of the community. So it's a bit like we're putting all these conditions on the applicant, and as I said, in my 11 years as a councillor, I've never seen so many. We're putting these conditions on the applicant, and then we're saying, oh, but we're still not going to approve it. So I think we have absolutely covered all of those conditions, and basically if the applicant doesn't meet the conditions, he doesn't have an approval. If he doesn't meet the fire and the noise and the traffic conditions that we've placed on him to the satisfaction of the city, he doesn't have an approval. So he has to meet them, and he has to continue to meet them. So the 480 does seem like a lot of people, but how often is he going to get those numbers? Probably not that often. But also other places in our city only have one like lunch. This is breakfast, morning tea. I work for a seniors group, and we are always looking for places for our seniors to go for morning tea. They just love to go somewhere and have a scone and a cuppa and move on. So those numbers are included in the 480, as are the staff. And if you consider breakfast, morning tea, lunch, the evening meal and spread it out, it's actually less than some of the other venues in this city. So I think we need to look at the recommendation before us. We've got all the conditions. You've seen all the extra conditions that have gone through, and I urge you to support this motion. Do I have a speaker against the motion? Councillor Ritchie, if you could just add to what you said before.
It's just probably just a couple of points I just wanted to make. I do note the scale of other operations in the city that both Councillor Giordano and yourself referred to, namely places like Corsada, Mason Mill and Mistel and so on. They do all have weddings, and they do all work on the vicinity of around about between 200 and 250 people as their proviso, and they appear to be able to make a pretty good living out of that. And that's my point about being able to bring something into scale. Thank you.
A speaker for the motion? Councillor Stallard.
Yes, unfortunately a tough decision all round, and I think most councillors are in a dilemma on which way to move with this one. I may paraphrase. I've got just a couple of pages, and I know everyone groans whenever I have pages in front of me, so I'll be fairly quick. Certainly this has been there since 46, I believe, and then in 2011 when the Water Authority decided that 80 was the number, and most people in the community and nearly all business people at times said it was a joke, it was a farce, 80 was not practical, it wasn't even possible. How could you hire staff? If 80 turned up for breakfast, then you'd have to shut it down, and you know, it was just a nonsense. You couldn't hire somebody and say you're only going to be working for breakfast, and your staff you wouldn't be able to keep staff, you wouldn't be able to maintain them, and that was a problem. And when we got the 350, the community, the applicant, and we as council agreed with that number. Since then, I remember that there was a comment that there was no work being done on it, but in actual fact, there were some of my ex-students working on that site during the following years, certainly after 2012, who were working there. And as we received today, a diagram showing that, or a picture from 2013 showing that there were alterations, not only, well, there were some happening inside, but they were also happening outside. So things have been progressing as we go along. Certainly I've not seen a level of impositions or conditions being put on any applicant in all my life on council. This has been so remarkable, and certainly, and I think most of these are at the request of councillors, of staff observation, but also of the community requests. And it's sad that they're not going to get everything they want in this situation if it's approved, but at the same time they're going some way towards it. People have been talking about having functions, birthday parties and weddings. Can I tell you that you can actually have a birthday party or a wedding on your property and there's no limit on the numbers? And they could be, and yet here there are limits. And we can control those limits, and we can control some of that noise. And if they don't comply, then we have a right to go in there and say, you haven't complied, you do it or else, and there'll be fines. And if it continues, then we got opportunity to take bigger measures. So certainly, you think about it, but there's not only do we have opportunities in private homes, we have it in halls and restaurants and reserves, and I've attended them on beach fronts and out on boats. So there's places you can have these. It doesn't, and they aren't called function centres. They basically aren't. Some are, but most of them aren't. And I've attended these all over the country. So in essence, these are there. I also believe that the number has to be controlled at any one time, and I'm concerned about traffic. I've always been concerned about that, and that's a big issue for me, especially Mundaringwe Road, and I think we need to go a bit further with that one later on. So I've got family and friends who are in that area, living through there, and many of them have said to me no. But I'm, not to the point of close friends, but people I've known for a long time. And then someone mentioned the Corsada House as being an example. Can I tell you that the Corsada House, we didn't put a lot of these conditions on. We didn't know these conditions. So what we did was we've inherited them as we've gone along. And we've made decisions as they've been going. But there's been problems with that one. But and the owners have worked with us, and the residents have worked with us, and we are getting there slowly, but we just didn't foresee it. This time, we've put the conditions on at the start. We are foreseeing a lot of the potential problems. And probably the only bonus for a lot of the people in the valley, and I've lived in valleys most of my life, so I can understand where some are coming from, but not all. And the noise coming across a valley, if they're up higher, isn't as bad. And as the emergency services, when they were looking at putting facilities in for transmitting to their people on the ground, it was better to be at the bottom projecting up and then from the top down, because you don't hear a lot of it from the top down. So these are things that we need to understand a little bit before we get too carried away with it all. So sadly, in one sense for me, I'm saying yes, in one sense because of what people around me are asking and also the potential for disruption. But on another sense, I think we as a community, and people must expect, it's been there since 46, it was always going to go ahead. Once Mr McCormack bought the place, it was always going to go ahead. It was just a matter of numbers, and that control was with the department, and they've said, Department of Health said 480, and that's what it's being projected to. Thank you.
Is there a speaker against? Councillor Sewell?
I just have a few questions based on Councillor Stellard's comments there, points of clarity actually, if I can just raise those questions. I did actually raise this at the last meeting as well. Continuously hear that 350 was approved by council some time ago, and I'm yet to see any evidence of that. So I once again ask the question, when was Chalet Riggy approved for 350 people, please?
Development Services?
Can I answer in that in part as well, because I was there? Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Through the chair, as previously stated at the 19th of May special council meeting, the city did issue an approval for 80 persons per day. There was a wastewater approval issued by the Department of Health for 350. Notwithstanding that, the planning approval still limited it to 80 persons per day.
So just to confirm, there was never approval from council for 350 people. And just another point of clarification, I do appreciate that we can have one-off birthdays. I'm just not quite sure that we have them 7 days per week, 350 days per year. So I just want to be clear on those 2 points, because I think they're somewhat misleading. And in terms of the traffic and addressing that later on, I'm just not quite sure how that would work. So how would we address the traffic issues later on?
Director?
Through the chair, I didn't make a statement to say that the traffic could be dealt with later on.
Question, Councillor Boyd?
I have a question for the director based on, if I can.
Sure.
Yep. Just based on a couple of statements that have been made about the conditions that have been placed on the applicant. Some statements have been made that, or the inference that I've taken is a lot of the conditions have been placed on the applicant. My understanding from reading the application is most of the conditions are things that the applicant needs to do prior to getting up and running, not conditions that they need to that have been placed on them once they're up and running. Is that? Can you please clarify if I've read that correctly, Director?
Through the chair, happy to provide clarification. Councillor Boyd, there are a number of conditions that require management plans and the like to be prepared to the city's satisfaction, some of which are required to be on city satisfaction on the advice of state government departments prior to the commencement of works or prior to operation. But there are some other conditions that are required to be implemented for perpetuity for the operation of the development.
Another question, Councillor Sewell?
Yes, just further reflections. I just wanted to clarify what Councillor Stellard meant by it was always going to go ahead by Matt McCormack once he purchased the property. Just wondering if you could explain by what you meant by that.
Do you wish Councillor Stellard to comment?
Sorry,
or the Director?
The fact that a businessman, and in this instance, Mr. McCormack, who lives just down below, the fact that he bought the property, then it was always he's stated in the past when he came through that he's always intended to develop it and open it as a restaurant. And that's the fact, and the clarification I think was in question to my statement earlier was that we as a council agreed to the numbers, but it wasn't acted upon by the applicant.
We are up to a speaker against. Councillor Village, you wish to speak against the motion?
I certainly do. Thank you. I'll be brief. Okay, we certainly do need tourism, there's no doubt about that, but not at the expense of all the people that live in that area. I'm concerned about the number of 350 that does keep getting thrown around, and my understanding is that that's also been thrown around because it is for feasibility and viability. I'd like to really stress to council that it is not council's position to approve a facility to have it so it is viable. That is not our concern. Whether it is viable or not it has absolutely nothing to do with us, and we cannot even take that into consideration at all, and that concerns me. Also, Councillor Giardina, he mentioned that let's give it a go. That was his exact words. I think that's pretty poor judgment when let's give it a go. What if things do go wrong? It's not good enough to say, well, let's give an approval here for 400 patrons and then let's give it a go. Well, no, I would say let's do it in reverse. Let's give approval for the 250. I support Councillor Ritchie. And if everything goes well, then the applicant can come back to council and request more patrons. So I would say err on the side of caution and support 250. Thank you.
Is there another speaker for the motion?
Questions?
Question, Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This evening we earlier heard a couple of speakers make some points that I'd like the Director to respond to. The first one was by Mr. Watts, who talked about patron noise and music, and that a plan would need to be submitted to the satisfaction of the city. And how does the Director see that plan deal with the built form? Because there was a reference to built form requirements or upgrades being part of that plan. So can you explain how that would work?
Director.
Thank you for your question, Councillor O'Connor. The noise management plan and noise impact statement condition, which I believe is condition N, requires a qualified and accredited noise consultant to undertake those investigations. And if those investigations require amendments to built form that do not form part of this development application, they will need to form part of a subsequent development application. That's the answer to your question.
Yes, Councillor O'Connor.
So from that, then the plan, until those conditions of that plan were met, the business couldn't operate. Is that correct?
Through the Chair, that's correct.
Thank you. A follow-up question. A gentleman spoke and talked about the fencing and the liability, insurance liability on neighbouring properties. I don't know who's going to respond to that, but can I have any clarification at all?
Through the Chair, any trespassing on private properties is a matter for the West Australian Police. If Council is of the view to have some sort of fencing installed at this property, it's currently not the subject of a condition, but we could impose, or the Council could impose, and we could craft a condition, an additional condition, requiring a fencing plan be prepared to the satisfaction of the city, and that fencing plan would outline materiality, height and the like, but that would be a new condition and would require an amendment to the resolution and officer recommendation.
Councillor O'Connor, you have any more questions? Do we have any more speakers we're up to for the motion?
I think the CEO's going to... Madam Chair, I'd like to foreshadow an amendment to this recommendation that along the lines of, with the help of the Director, to the effect that a sufficient fence or fence plan or whatever it is be conditioned.
I will go back to the mover and ask if they would be willing to accept that amendment.
Yes, I'd be happy with that.
And the seconder? Councillor Sewell, you have a question?
Yeah, just in the context of fencing within water catchment areas and what the implications are of that, please.
Through the chair, on face value, no implications.
So can I confirm, sorry, that there won't be any retaining walls of anything of that nature which would prevent water from accumulating within Piercy Brook, Nalhena catchment?
Through the chair, the fencing would generally be guided by the city's fencing local law. However, there may be a need, depending on the location of the property, for some amendments to that local law, and that can be considered as part of the fencing plan.
So we will pause for a minute to allow the director to add that to the conditions so we're all very clear what we're voting on. And then I'll go back to the mover to see if he has any more comments, and then we'll put this to the vote. I know, but it's a hard one. Councillors, you now have a new condition which you see in front of you, which is said. Is everyone clear on that? Now I will go back to the mover. Do you
Madam
have...
Chair, sorry.
Yes.
I'd like to speak for the motion.
Oh,
I asked a
sorry.
couple of questions before. But,
Sorry, you did. Councillor O'Connor, for the motion.
thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, I obviously, like everyone, have given this a lot of thought, and I think the conditions are appropriate that we've applied. I've heard two speakers say that they've never seen an application with more stringent conditions, and one I have is the recent JDAP that dealt with the Union Road distillery. Those was the most stringent conditions I've ever seen on a DA, and these conditions are a very close second. I think the city, the council and the city officers have taken into account all of the commentary from the community regarding amenity, as to the extent that they can in the way they've applied conditions. I think the city has available to them mechanisms to ensure compliance that will not severely impact the amenity of the surrounding residents. And I ask you to support this motion. Thank you.
Is there a speaker against the motion? We'll go back to the mover. Do you have any further comments, Councillor Blair?
Just quick comments, and the major items that I thought when all of this started for us councillors was the water numbers and noise, and the way that we are making this amendment to the conditions. I just think the 200 number is going to help with those three major issues that the residents and the council and even the staff have understood, that how important the water is, the numbers in the valley and the noise in the valley. So I'd encourage councillors to vote with us for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blair. Councillors, you've all seen the new conditions. You've all seen the two minor amendments to this. We've got a mover and a seconder. I'm going to put the officer recommendation with those two amendments. All those in favour? Councillor Stallard, Councillor Giardina, Councillor Blair, Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Thomas. And against? Councillor Sewell, Councillor O'Donnell, Councillor Cannon, Councillor Boyd, Councillor Billich, Councillor Cooper and Councillor Ritchie. The motion is lost. We'll now go to the alternative motion. If we could have that on the screen. Can I ask the mover of this motion, are you happy with the, not the 200 because that's changed, but the fencing condition to stay?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. While we wait, it's up on the screen. Is there a seconder for this motion, Councillor Boyd? I'm going to go to the mover. You've already spoken at length, but if you wish to add anything else, please do, Councillor Ritchie.
No, I think I've probably covered all the areas that I wanted to cover. I guess I would just note that I wanted to find that balance so that it is, even if it was subject to appeal, we'd be in a fairly strong position to be able to defend our position. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boyd?
Yeah, thank you. I'll be brief. I think this amended recommendation finds a happy balance for the community and for the applicant, hopefully, to be able to for the applicant to be able to have their business as a restaurant, and for the community to hopefully not have too much of an impact, but for the roadways, for the bush fire implications to hopefully be safe business as well. Thank you.
I'm not going to go against four unless somebody a councillor particularly wishes to speak, and I will allow that. Otherwise, I'll just remind councillors that you can still vote against this motion if you wish, and then your motion, you might put another motion that we don't approve anything. I'll just remind you of that. I'm sure you know that. But if no one wishes to speak, I'll just go back to the mover. Just is there any other point you wish to raise?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm putting the motion you have in front of you. All those in favour? Councillor Sewell, Councillor Cannon, Councillor Boyd, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Ritchie. All those against? Councillor Stallard, Councillor Giardina, Councillor O'Donnell, Councillor Billich, Councillor Blair, Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Thomas. That motion is not carried.
Is there another motion that's going on the floor, or is this item going to lapse?
Does any councillor wish to move another motion? Let's have a 5-minute break and come back. If you would take your seats, please. So we've had two motions on the floor that have not passed. Now we have a motion. Do we have it on the screen, please?
Yes, Councillor O'Donnell is
Councillor
proposing
O'Donnell?
a revised motion.
Councillor O'Donnell, will you just outline your motion? Don't speak on it, just outline it.
Thank you. I think the motion is to suggest the number of 350 patrons. The conditions are all in line with the other previous applications, with the exception to the 200 patrons.
Thank you. And you're happy with the fencing and all the other conditions?
Yes.
Do we have a seconder for this motion? Thanks, Councillor Giardina. Councillor O'Donnell, do you wish to say anything else?
Thank you. I think we've heard both sides of the discussion as to what constitutes in some people's minds too much and what doesn't appear too much, and I guess that my thought is to have a reasonable compromise. I think the amount of 350 would allow a reasonable flow between the 3 breakfast, lunch and dinner, and also staffing and have some extra numbers. Obviously it's not in line with the number of the ATU requirements, so I think that the number is reasonable, and I would like hopefully councillors to support that.
Councillors, I'm not going to go into debate. I think we've all said what we want to say. I'm just going straight to put the motion. Is everyone happy with that? Okay, you've got the motion in front of you. It's 350 with 200 at any one time. Who supports this motion? Councillor Stallard, Councillor Giardina, Councillor O'Donnell, Councillor Cannon, Councillor Boyd, Councillor Blair, Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Thomas. Can someone tell me how many that is? 7. The motion is 8. And against? Councillor Sewell, Councillor Billich, Councillor Cooper and Councillor Ritchie. The motion is carried. Well done, councillors. This was a very difficult thing. I also wish to thank our staff. I think they've worked very hard on the conditions. It was always going to be a difficult one, and we've worked together and we've come up with a solution. So well done. And with that, I close the meeting at 7:46.